What is that sound? The Japanese pilot's voice cracked over his radio as a deafening roar cut through the skies above Tokyo. He tilted his head upward, squinting through the blinding sun. At first he thought they were bombers, but these were different. Faster, sleeker, silver predators slicing through the clouds. Before we move further into this story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear. Let's dive in. The American P-51 Mustangs had arrived. For months, Tokyo's skies had belonged to the Empire. Japanese pilots had grown used to lumbering B-29s crawling in from the Pacific, massive but vulnerable targets. Had trained to dive, strike, and vanish before enemy escorts could catch them. But this day was different. The Mustangs weren't crawling. They were hunting. The lead Mustang's engine snarled like a beast, sunlight glinting off its yellow nose. Below, civilians on the streets froze mid-step, looking skyward in awe and terror. Above them, Japanese Zero pilots tightened their grips on their controls. None of them had expected this. The P-51 had been America's answer to a desperate problem. At the start of the war, U.S. bombers had been massacred without long-range escort. Pilots begged for a fighter that could keep up with the bombers all the way to enemy territory and still fight toe-to-toe with the best planes the Axis could throw at them. What rolled off the factory floor was beyond anyone's wildest imagination. Sleek machine with the range of a bomber and the agility of a knife in the sky. Now that knife was pointed straight at Tokyo. The Japanese ace leading the defense squadron gritted his teeth, radioing his men. Attack. Drive them away. He shoved his Zero into a climb, the engine screaming as it strained against gravity. But the Mustang above him barely twitched, then rolled gracefully, dropping behind his tail in seconds. The hunter had become the hunted. Tracer fire lit the sky, streaks of red tearing past his cockpit. The Japanese ace yanked hard on his stick, barely dodging death. Sweat stung his eyes. He had fought British Spitfires, American Wildcats, even heavy Thunderbolts. None of them moved like this. The P-51 danced through the clouds, its Merlin engine roaring, as if mocking him. On the streets of Tokyo, civilians gasped as aerial jewels exploded above their heads. The Mustangs dove like hawks, their guns spitting fire, shredding Japanese planes before they could even line up a shot. The once-invincible Zero, symbol of Japanese air superiority, looked suddenly fragile, outpaced, outgunned, outmaneuvered. But for the Mustang pilots, this moment was about more than victory. Many of them had friends who never returned from earlier bombing runs. They remembered empty bunks back at base, remembered writing letters to mothers and wives with shaking hands now soaring above Tokyo. They carried more than firepower, carried vengeance. One pilot, barely 22, spotted a Zero climbing toward a B-29. His knuckles whitened as he remembered his older brother, lost in a similar attack months before. With a snarl, he dove, the Mustang shrieking downward, his guns blazed, and the Zero erupted in flames, spiraling helplessly into the bay below. "That one's for you, Johnny," he whispered into the wind. The Japanese pilots fought desperately, but the sky was no longer theirs. For the first time, they faced an enemy that didn't just match them, but surpass them. The once proud warriors looked up, seeing silver wings cutting across their capital, and realized with dread that the tide of the war had shifted forever. The Mustangs weren't just planes, they were symbols. Symbols of industrial power, of relentless innovation of a nation that had turned desperation into dominance. They escorted the B-29s all the way from Yuhima, a journey once thought impossible. And now, high above Tokyo, they made it clear there was nowhere left to hide. Hours later, as the surviving Mustangs turned for home, smoke rose from the outskirts of the city. The skies, once echoing with Japanese confidence, were silent, except for the fading growl of Merlin engines. On the ground, civilians whispered to one another in shock. Even the military officers standing on rooftops had no words. For the Japanese pilots who returned, the silence in their cockpits was heavier than any defeat. They had faced a machine that broke the rules of the sky, and they knew the war would never be the same again. The young American pilots, exhausted but victorious, landed back on Yuhima, to cheering ground crews. Some kissed the dirt, okay? Others raised their fists to the sky. They had not only survived, they had changed history. The P-51 Mustang had proven itself in Europe against the Luftwaffe, but over Tokyo, it delivered its final message. Air supremacy was now firmly in American hands. When innovation meets courage, even the mightiest empires can be shaken. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and drop a karma in the comments below.